Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Radiology Pitch Club. Very excited. We've got three really interesting companies tonight that I think you will enjoy learning more about their innovation. As always, we're excited to see familiar faces who have joined us before, but we also welcome those of you who are joining us for Pitch Club for the first time. And just to give kind of a high-level overview, so Pitch Club is an event we do every 2 weeks. We try to rotate through the various specialties within the medical and oral care industries so that we really have the opportunity to see, the breadth of innovation that is going on. And so, we always welcome you to come and join us. The focus is really, on kind of a combination of things. One is we want to give you exposure to some of the early technology that's coming out. And especially for our clinicians, we want the opportunity for you to be able to provide feedback and through both surveys as well as the questions you have to kind of give that clinical expertise and voice into what the direction these companies are going. We also want to give these companies exposure. So, not only to those of you who attend, but following the event, we do make the presentations available within our broader network for them to have an opportunity to get the exposure and people to see the great things they're doing. And then the last thing is we do, just like the opportunity that this creates of education and people to get the opportunity to see what's going on from an entrepreneurial and business perspective. So a few things about tonight. We do have three companies presenting. We will have an opportunity for live Q&A. And then this will be followed by a poll where we get your feedback on each of the companies. It's just a couple questions, so we ask that you do take a minute to fill it out because it creates a lot of valuable insight for the companies that have come and worked hard to do these presentations. The last thing is following the event, we do have a post-event networking session. Each of our presenters will have a table there. We also have a Pitch Club extension this week, Cardia, and we did send that out prior to the event, but we will send it out again to everyone if you didn't get a chance to see it. But they do also have a table, and we've got John Hawkins here from them. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Katie Richardson, who's our MC for the evening.
Thanks, Jennifer. Welcome, everyone. As Jennifer mentioned, we have 3 live pitches tonight, and I would say between those companies and our Pitch Club extension company, they cover a wide variety of specialties. So we're excited to have both radiologists and folks from orthopedics, pulmonology, oncology, again, a wide breadth. So sit back, I would say, and we'll go ahead and get started. Our first company or our first presenter tonight is Joe Camarata, and he is the president and CEO of Quantaris. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, Joe. I know you guys just changed your name, so welcome. You can go ahead and share your screen.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Camarata, president and CEO of Quantaris, formerly Quantitative Radiology Solutions. And as Katie said, we just made the announcement of the name change yesterday, so our slides will still say QRS. But what we're focused on is enabling body-wide analysis of medical images to inform cancer treatment decisions. And I'd like to share with you tonight a first application that we have to improve the accuracy and efficiency of radiation treatment planning. So the problem that we're trying to solve is inefficient contouring of organs at risk. It turns out that about 33% of the patients that receive radiation treatment as part of their cancer treatment have a side effect that warrants an inpatient visit or an inpatient admission or a visit to the emergency room. And when we begin to look at why, we begin to focus on the treatment planning process. There's one step in the treatment planning process. It's called contouring of organs at risk. And here, a dosimetrist or a physician will sit down, they'll take their mouse, and they'll go through a CT study and painstakingly outline all of those organs that need to be protected from irradiation. It's a very time-consuming process. In a head and neck case like you see here, it could take 60 to 90 minutes. And it's also a lot of human variability in the process. Now, there are some automatic approaches to doing contouring of organs at risk. In fact, the first one received FDA clearance back in 2010, but they require too much manual editing. They're not widely adopted. And when we talk to physicians about why, what they said is they require so much manual editing, it's easier to just contour manually from the beginning. So we're taking a technology out of the University of Pennsylvania, and the technology is called automatic anatomy recognition. So for radiologists or people familiar with imaging, it's simply image segmentation software. For those of you that aren't as familiar, it is the best way for me to describe it is kind of facial recognition for medical images. So you give us a CT exam and we go in and we locate all of the anatomical structures that are in that CT exam, and then we analyze them, or in this case, we contour them. So when we've taken this technology and applied it to this problem of OAR contouring, what we have is an approach that's very consistently contours to the medical consensus guidelines, and I'll explain later why that is. Extremely robust in that it's able to handle all types of anomalies such as pathologies, streak artifacts, post-surgical manipulations. And we've also built it that it's very flexible. It's on a cloud-based platform, and we're really trying to build it such that it can be accessed from anywhere from in the healthcare system and reduce overall adoption costs. So a little bit more about the technology. We like to call it anatomy-guided deep learning. So first of all, we start out with some proprietary anatomical models and algorithms. And what these models do is they capture the geometrical relationships between the objects in a body region. So you see here on the screen, we have a head and neck case that's, or a head and neck model with all of the anatomical structures represented. It not only captures the geometrical relationships, but it also captures information about how each one of those structures appears on a radiological image, okay? And we use this information in order to localize the structure. So when you give us a case, we'll actually apply the models and the algorithms to localize all of the anatomical structures. It's very, very consistent in terms of its localization. And then we use deep learning in order to produce the contours. Now, a lot of times people will use deep learning and they'll scoop up some existing cases and they'll train their deep learning on those cases. We didn't do that because those cases contain variation and we didn't want the variation. What we did is we actually contoured the cases to the medical consensus guidelines and then had a physician review those contours. And then we trained our system on what we call the ground truths, which were produced to the medical consensus guidelines. This was a very innovative approach and one that we had to share with the FDA in a pre-submission meeting to make sure that they were comfortable with how we were producing the ground truths for our deep learning algorithm. We had the opportunity to evaluate our technology at 4 academic medical centers. And those centers registered 214 patients on our behalf. And we looked at 3 outcomes. So first of all, in terms of accuracy, we were able to demonstrate that our automatically drawn contours were more accurate and consistent than the current standard of care to medical consensus guidelines. So you see here a so-called box and whisker diagram on the left-hand side of your screen. The blue is the automated is the automated contours, and the red are the manual contours. The blue is higher than the red, which means it's more accurate, but also the whiskers are narrower, which means it's more consistent in contouring. We also looked at the efficiency, and we were able to demonstrate a time savings of 50 to 70% in OAR contouring when using our technology. And the third outcome was more of a subjective outcome. We simply went back and asked the physicians, how useful are these contours in radiation treatment planning? And in 8 out of the 10 structures, what they told us is that the contours could be used with little or no modifications. So that's a kind of a ringing endorsement in terms of being able to produce contours that require very little or no manual editing, unlike the existing systems. Just a little bit more about where we are and where we're going. So the company was founded in 2013 by the Penn Center for Innovation. We were actually founded by 2 professors from the Department of Radiology at Penn Medicine. I joined the company in 2015, and we started our product development efforts in 2016. We got some SBIR funding from the National Cancer Institute, and also the National Science Foundation. We were able to leverage that for some matching funds from a group in Philadelphia called Phase One Ventures. After we did our product development, we were able to do a retrospective analysis on over 400 cases from Penn Medicine. Again, we were able to get additional funding from the National Cancer Institute, and then we got more matching funding from Phase One Ventures, and also brought on another local organization called Ben Franklin Technology Partners. So this was our overall seed round. This Phase Two funding from the National Cancer Institute was for $2 million, and it allowed us to conduct our clinical evaluation at 4 sites, 3 of them which are shown here on the screen. And that was the evaluation that I showed you on the last slide. Based on the results of that evaluation, we submitted to the FDA at the end of 2020, and in April of this year, we got 510(k) clearance to bring our product into the market in the United States. We also are raising a seed round, and we have a lead investor. Martins and Ventures has signed on as the lead investor for our seed round, and we're looking to close that round sometime this month or next month. So going forward, we'll be bringing our technology into market in targeting radiation therapy centers. We already have another grant from NCI to expand the application to looking at treatment response. So instead of just looking at contouring of organs at risk, we'll be able to start looking at the disease tissue, using that also for contouring, but also being able to look at how it's responding to the treatment. In general, we're participating in a market that's over $500 million just on the U.S. side, and we think that by 2023 we could be EBITDA positive and be funding our future development out of our profits. A little bit about who we are. So I have a background 30 years plus in medical imaging with companies such as Siemens Healthineers and GE Healthcare. Steve Owens, who is on the call with us tonight and will be at the networking session, is the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Technology Officer. Steve and I worked together at Siemens, and then he went off to work in doing medical imaging work in the pharmaceutical industry. We're also joined tonight by Gargi Pednikar, who is our product manager, and she'll be also joining us for the network session. So I think that's the major points that I wanted to make. And with that, I'll close my presentation and be available for questions.
Great, Joe. Thank you so much again for sharing about QRS or Quantaris tonight. This is exciting stuff. And for those of you that are in our audience, we would love for you to put any questions that you have for Joe and his company in the Q&A function. I want to know a little bit more about, you mentioned there was one clinical study or maybe a couple together that encompassed 214 patients. Do you have more plans for additional clinical studies in the future?
We do, Katie. As a matter of fact, as I mentioned, we are been supported through SBIR grants from the National Cancer Institute. And as part of that, and as part of us completing our Series A round, we're eligible with what's called a Phase 2B grant. And we've spoken to the NCI, our program manager, about this. And what he asked us to do was to look at the clinical outcomes. Now, we showed it operational outcomes, accuracy, efficiency, acceptability.
Right.
But he said, take it to the next step and show the clinical outcomes. Can you demonstrate that you're having a reduction of side effects for cancer patients undergoing radiation therapy? So we'll be applying for that grant next year. It'll probably be about $2 million, and we'll be looking for sites to work on doing that evaluation with us.
That's fantastic. And I agree with your advisors and everything. We need to know what those clinical outcomes are. So that's fantastic. So we have a couple of questions from the audience. Can you provide a little more detail on how your platform fits into the clinical workflows?
So yes, it is I mentioned before, it's a cloud-based platform, and it works. You simply upload DICOM images to it, and then we give you the results back. So there is no user interface per se. It's completely automated, the segmentation or contouring. So a person can upload a DICOM image to us, and we'll return what's called the DICOM RT structures, which will go into the treatment planning system. And this way, the physician or dosimetrist is working in their treatment planning system to make whatever modifications. Right now, the upload and download are actually manual steps, but in the next product release, we'll be automating that.
Great. And we have a few questions about your business plan. So tell us a little bit more about your business plan, your go-to-market strategy, some questions around, is it a one-time purchase or a SaaS product? What's the price point, et cetera?
Okay, so being cloud-based, it is a SaaS product. And we think that using a SaaS-based agreement gives us some flexibility on the pricing side. So for example, I mentioned to you that head and neck were the most challenging cases. So we can actually start an institution by just, at a reasonable price point focusing on their head and neck cases. And as they become comfortable with the technology, move that to lung, move that to prostate, and continue to grow in that. I think, in terms of large institutions, large enterprise institutions, it's probably going to be about $150,000 a year in terms of the annual subscription. And we have ROI data, which shows that that's backed up just by personnel savings in terms of that. So right now we're in market. We've been targeting the proton centers. There's 36 proton centers in the United States. And because they have the highest need for more accurate planning and more efficient planning so they can replan during the course of treatment. So we've been in discussions with those. But our big launch is actually going to happen at ASTRO. ASTRO happens at McCormick Center in Chicago next month, and we'll be exhibiting in ASTRO.
Great. And one other question from our audience. And this goes, I think, to your cost savings, I would say. What kind of absolute time savings are you seeing per study?
So coming back to what we showed in the clinical evaluation, it was about 50 to 70%. So if you look at, if you look at a head and neck study that was an hour to an hour and a half long, it's about 45 to 50 minutes. In our clinical evaluation, for example, in the thoracic studies, it was taking about 40 to 45 minutes to contour those manually. And, we were able to show, 15 to 20 minutes in terms of doing the editing on the automatic contours.
Great. And one last question. I hear you talking about, so starting with head and neck, moving on clearly to other parts of the body. Do you see additional future use cases for this technology?
We do, as I mentioned. So the underlying technology, the automatic anatomy recognition, it really is a platform. And what makes it unique is its ability to localize structures very precisely. And once you can localize a structure, you can do an analysis. We're doing contouring on it now, but I mentioned we're also starting to localize lesions that are within structures. And then we're applying the technology in our second NCI grant to PET CT, and then being able to look at quantifying the amount of disease that's in an anatomical structure or organ or body region. Once we're able to quantify that, we can begin to use it for treatment response. So that's one of the other examples. We also have some work that we're doing and looking at body composition analysis. So you can look at the volume of skeletal mass or muscle or fat.
Sure. Interesting. All right, Joe, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I realize we did not quite get to all of our questions, but Joe's going to stick around for our networking time after all the pitches have completed. Thank you so much again for being here. And now I'm going to invite Dr. Mark Froimson to the stage, and he is going to tell us a little bit about our recent Alpha Partner Summit that occurred last week. And I think probably some of you in our audience have joined, and Mark's going to tell us all about it. Give us a little summary. What were the highlights, Mark?
Thanks, Katie, and congrats, Joe, on a great company. So as you said, we had a really terrific Alpha Summit last week. And for those of you who may not be as familiar with AngelMD, we do a lot of different programming, really designed to help companies really become successful. We want to see innovations blossom. We want to see innovations help patients. And so we bring together physicians, clinicians, companies, and in this case, investors and venture partners. And the Alpha Summit is really designed to bring new voices, really essential voices, to the fore, And I'll tell you, it was great content. I learned a lot. And it was really, I think, a testament to the power of the platform that we were able to engage so many end users, partners, investors, the really key elements that companies need to get beyond the, this is a great idea and I'm solving a real problem, to partnering with those who can make it happen. And I was really impressed by the content. I was impressed by the fact that I learned a lot from some of these partners. And one of the things I think the takeaway, and there are lots of takeaways, but one takeaway is really that innovation's a team sport. And many of us come to this thinking we have a lock on an idea, we understand a problem, we see a clear path forward. And often there's a lot of obstacles out there that we don't even see. And it's really important to engage with some of our partners, whether they're IP attorneys, whether they're health system venture funds, whether they're opportunity zones. There are just so many things that we can learn. There are many different skill sets. We have to always understand what our own weaknesses are, and what we're missing from our team, and look out there to find those resources. And I think the Alpha Summit really did a great job with that. The other key point that I took away is just how we all seem to speak different languages. There's the finance language, the science language, the clinical language, supply chain, all sorts of different types of languages in healthcare. We can talk past one another. And one of the key lessons that I think really resonated from the meeting was to become better communicators, to become better listeners, to not fall in love with our own solutions and our own ideas, but to actually reach out to the people we need, the people we're trying to help, the people we're serving, and listen to them and identify kind of what their needs are and how we can fill in the gaps. So, I like to say, don't fall in love with your idea or your solution, but really identify the problem that your customer is having, but the person that you're looking to help. So great. The Alpha Conference, the Alpha Summit was a great complement to what we do here on Pitch Club, and a really important set of content and an important offering from AngelMD. And we look forward to the next one, which I believe is in early November, and more will be coming out about that. But I would encourage anybody who wants to deepen their perspective on the whole environment of innovation and bringing innovation to market to think about joining us. And I'd encourage you to join us for the next Alpha Summit.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. I neglected to mention, for those of you that are in our audience tonight, we do want to give feedback, as Jennifer mentioned at the outset. We want to give feedback to these CEOs, these entrepreneurs, these startup companies. Jennifer has posted the poll link in the chat. All you need to do to answer those very few quick questions is click on the poll. And again, this is information we provide back to the companies. They want your feedback. They have helped us create some of these questions as well. And the feedback is what they're looking for from our clinician community and those of you that are joining us at Pitch Club. So please take the time to do so. And in the meantime, I am going to bring up our next presenter. So Chris Wood is the CEO of RevealDx. And Chris, we're excited to have you here. Go ahead and share your slides, and we'd love to hear about your company. And apparently my dog is going to join the party too.
Great. Thanks, Katie. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Wood, CEO of RevealDx. We are a Seattle-based company that produces and sells software that makes clinicians who diagnose and treat lung cancer better at what they do. Lung cancer, if you don't know this, is the #1 cancer killer in the US, responsible for more death than breast, prostate, and colon cancer combined. The good news is that we can cut mortality in high-risk populations by over 20% by screening for cancer using low-dose CT or computed tomography scans. The problem we're addressing is that screening cost is way too high. It is not, however, due to the cost of the CT itself, but because about a third of the time a lung nodule is found by the radiologist. 95% of these nodules are benign, but to find out which is which, we need to spend over $2,000 per nodule. This translates to $10 billion a year. In 80% of the cases, the unnecessary cost takes the form of an interval scan. In other words, the diagnosis of nodules is delayed because the only way to determine their risk is to rescan in a few months and see if it has grown. This results in delayed diagnosis and is obviously not optimal patient care. When action is taken right away, a biopsy or surgery is performed. Biopsies are up to 62% benign, and thoracic surgery is up to 35% benign. These lung biopsies and surgeries are invasive and dangerous, which have a complication rate of 22%, which increases morbidity and mortality and also adds $1.4 billion to the cost. A new proteomics test was introduced in 2020, but it will not work on over 95% of nodules because they must have grown to over 8 millimeters before they start shedding DNA detected by the test. An ideal solution would assist the clinician in determining which nodules need immediate attention and which can be ignored until the next regularly scheduled screening event. Our solution does just that. We use radiomics techniques and AI to triage nodules using only the CT data itself after the nodule is found by the radiologist. We spent several years and examined over 14,000 features to figure out how to build the most accurate classification engine. This engine computes what we call a malignancy similarity index, or MSI, which informs clinical decision-making just like a blood test. We patented key parts of this technology and have added proprietary enhancements, making the software more robust, meaning it will work on a variety of scanners, protocols, and reconstruction techniques. We're explicitly not a black box algorithm. We know how this technology works, and we can QA the system in the field. Making AI robust is the most difficult problem in the use of AI for radiology today, and we have solved it, allowing for the immediate adoption of our solution at any institution. So here are two examples. In this first example, we see a nodule marked by the red dot on the CT scan. The standard of care today would be to wait 6 months and perform one of these interval scans. But our MSI shows that there is an extremely high likelihood of this nodule being malignant. In addition, nearly all the similar nodules we found in our database are malignant. In this case, we would recommend taking immediate action before this cancer grows and metastasizes. In the second example, we see another nodule where an interval scan would also be the standard of care. In this case, however, our MSI shows that there is less than a 1% chance of this nodule developing into cancer in the next 5 years. The correct action in this case is to send the patient home and simply have them continue their normal screening if they are at high risk. And yes, in both of these cases, our MSI was correct. This nodule was proven benign, and the previous nodule was proven to be malignant. We have validated this technology using the National Lung Screening data and have shown a 29% reduction in false positives, removing the need for unnecessary follow-up, while simultaneously detecting nearly half of the malignant nodules before an interval scan. Just the reduction of the false positives will save healthcare in the US $3 billion annually, but more importantly, the faster diagnosis of half of the questionable nodules will surely decrease costs and improve outcomes. In addition, we've just completed a retrospective study with the Saskatchewan Health Authority in Canada, looking at every nodule found in every chest CT in the entire province for the last 5 years. Using these incidentally found nodules, not screening nodules, we found a 24% reduction in false positives and found cancerous nodules without an interval scan 36% of the time. RevealDx was started in March of 2021 when a group of investors experienced in commercialization of imaging-based products, including me, purchased the assets of Mindshare Medical. At the time of purchase, the company had invested over $5 million and had an outstanding product which was technically ready for commercialization but was awaiting publication of clinical validation data. We've since completed our clinical validation with NLST data as well as the Saskatchewan Health Authority. We've also submitted for a grant with 3 NHS Foundation trusts, and a participating investigator in the NHS study is Dr. Graham Robinson, who is current president of the British Society of Thoracic Imaging. Additional data for validation has been identified, and we expect to perform additional studies beginning in early 2022. We currently have CE Mark and Health Canada approval. We have completed our pre-submission to the FDA, with clearance expected in the first half of 2022. We plan to apply for a CP2 code as well in June, with reimbursement starting perhaps as quickly as 2023. Also in preparation for commercial launch, we recently signed a distribution agreement with Volpara. Volpara's customers currently account for 8% of lung cancer screening in the US. They will begin to market in Australia and their home country of New Zealand. Then we'll begin selling our systems in the US post FDA. Revenue will begin in early 2022. Our US strategy is to target payer provider networks first as they realize the benefits, then sell to conventional fee-for-service providers after obtaining Medicare reimbursement. We have completed our friends and family round as well as $500,000 bridge, and our seed round will bring us to cash flow positive. There are many companies in lung cancer and imaging that could be potential acquirers, and we typically see valuations that are at least 25x EBITDA for rapidly growing companies. We're still a small team right now, but we have assembled an outstanding team who are all industry veterans. I'm a medical physicist who's worked in the industry for 30 years. I'm also a serial entrepreneur who has started 2 companies in the radiology space, including the first company to get FDA cleared to do computer-aided detection for breast cancer in MRI images. Both companies had successful exits. I invite you to reach out to me, the email listed on the slide, and I appreciate your attention and thank you to AngelMD for the opportunity to showcase our company. Thanks.
Chris, we're happy to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing with us about RevealDx. Lots of clapping emojis. So people are excited about it, which is fantastic.
It's good.
I have to say, I think the data on your first slide when you're talking about the problem is the most impressive to me. The number of unnecessary follow-up scans and biopsies that potentially could be prevented with this technology is amazing.
Yeah. And we're doing, since lung cancer screening is pretty new relative to things like breast cancer screening. But one of the things that's unique about lung cancer screening is that it's so difficult to biopsy something you find, which is why this technology is so useful, because you can do that non-invasively. You can assess the risk associated with that nodule.
Sure. So tell us again, because I think this is an important differentiator. What are the things that differentiate you from other platforms that may be out there trying to do this with lung nodules? And then how are you different from traditional AI?
Yeah, so first, there are a lot of companies that are doing detection of lung nodules, which is also an important problem. But there's really no proof that detecting additional nodules has any impact on patient outcomes, right? Whereas something like this, you can trace it directly down to how it's going to impact patients in terms of earlier diagnosis, et cetera. So we're not a detection company. We are a characterization company. There's only 5 companies that have ever gotten approved by the FDA, soon to be 6, for diagnostics, not for detection. And we're using radiomics techniques, which are different than sort of letting the AI system kind of train itself and not knowing really what it's looking at and figuring out how it can determine whether their nodule is dangerous or not. We actually went in and found the features that were clinically relevant and trained our system on those set of features, incorporating AI as well as other, like I said, proprietary techniques in order to build a classification system that would really be able to pull out of a nodule the important diagnostic features, even if it was on a different scanner, even if it was, different reconstruction technique, slightly different protocol. Our technology is designed to work in all those cases.
That's fantastic. And I'm going to move on to a few questions from our audience. So since this is AI, speaking of artificial intelligence, is it reasonable to assume the numbers of false positives and identification of malignancy continues to improve with time and usage?
Well, the FDA does not allow you to sort of deploy a system that can be trained in real time as you're kind of going through cases, because they're afraid that you'll drift away from truth if the data isn't so good. But yes, every time we get additional data, we will be going back and looking at the algorithm, seeing if we can tweak it, pull its performance up just a little bit. This is going to be an ongoing maintenance of our system and we expect it to get better over time. And this is the reason people will pay for our subscription, is that they'll continue to get improved performance over time.
Great. And a question from another entrepreneur here with us tonight. Can you explain why your FDA timeline to get to clearance is so short? Is that because you're leveraging your CE mark approval? This is important, I think, for all entrepreneurs in the audience.
Yeah, the quality system is there, and as evidenced by our CE mark. So a lot of the design controls and a lot of the things that we need in order to even apply are there. But it is a 510K product, so it is a 90-day turnaround by design. Just like Joe's company, we had to do our pre-sub meeting, and we've prepared all the materials for that. Otherwise, if we were ready to submit now, it would literally be a 90-day turnaround. So we're adding in on a little additional time because we're going to run a reader study. We're going to build that data along with, the other standard stuff that goes into 510K, and we'll be sending that out at the beginning of the year.
That's fantastic. There are several additional questions I will tell you from our audience. I'm going to take one more. I want to hear, so on your timeline or on one of your slides, you mentioned that some of these nodules are subjected to proteomics. Talk a little bit more about that, because it sounds like that is not universal, but I would imagine if we had that data combined with the data that you're gathering with your system, that could be really huge. That's
right. Two things there, really. One is I was very happy that Biodesix got approved for this because they've demonstrated that you can charge $3,500 per nodule for a proteomics based test that will help you triage this nodule without going in and biopsying, right? So people want this type of approach where you can avoid biopsy and thoracic surgery, and they will pay a significant amount for it. It sort of validates, I said $2,000 per nodule, but it's actually in many healthcare systems quite a bit higher than that. So they validated our pricing model to a certain degree. And of course, what you're saying is absolutely true. We're going to be looking for partnerships in these types of companies, and there are a few of them. Veracyte also has pretty interesting tech that uses a nasal swab. Combining that data with radiomics data that we have on the nodule to trying to figure out what is the risk that this patient has is ultimately where this probably will end up, and we're very much engaged in those conversations.
That's very exciting. Chris, thank you again for being here tonight. I know we have several unanswered questions from our audience, but remember, Chris will join us for the networking after all the pitches from 7 to 7:30 Mountain Time. So save your questions, and please don't hesitate to come join us and ask Chris yourself.
Perfect. So as Katie said, I'm Alexander. I'm the CEO and co-founder of MIST, and we're a company providing AI-powered spinal diagnostics. So this all started with my own personal journey. When my brother and I were young, we were both diagnosed with scoliosis. And unfortunately for the both of us, after years of conservative treatment and going back and forth between different physicians and getting multiple different imaging studies done, we both ended up receiving surgery. And we're not alone. There are 24 million individuals in the US that are imaged for spinal conditions each year. And we know from the literature that these measures are time consuming for physicians, often taking anywhere between 10 minutes to 15 minutes on average to do and to do full reports for, which contributes to radiology backlogs. On top of that, in the literature, it's also reported that inaccurate measurements can cause further progression of pain or deformity. And we've had our own internal study that was accepted to AANS this year to further validate that. And lastly, these workflows are further inhibited by antiquated technologies and protocols. For example, when I've had my imaging, it's always been on CDs, and it's 2021. No one really has CD drives on their computers anymore. So this inhibits data transfer between physicians as well as directly to patients. At MIST, we solve these issues in two big ways by combining imaging data with clinic data in a big data play. From the imaging perspective, we've built a platform that processes images in less than 10 seconds with approximately 95% accuracy. And from the clinic data perspective, we're building a teledata app that allows us to screen patients for better care, as well as to track patient progression over time and determine who may or may not need surgery faster for physicians. This allows us to do three main things. First, We can provide predictive outcomes. We can look at a patient on day one, look at their imaging and baseline clinic data study, and say in 6 months, how well will this patient be doing? Will they need surgery? We can quantify qualitative metrics that are currently used in physician offices and provide insurance with numeric indications that helps them determine whether procedures are required. And lastly, we can improve diagnostics. So for conditions that you might not be able to detect if you haven't done an imaging study, from a clinic data perspective, we can indicate to physicians that those imaging studies may be needed in the first place. From the imaging perspective, we've built a robust computer vision machine learning model on a repository of about 10,000 images right now, with 50,000 images in our pipeline from our current partners. In order to utilize the software, physicians can upload an image to our current MVP that's a standalone platform, and we're working with companies right now to build out API integration into current picture archiving and communication systems. Our model then performs landmark detection using key point feature detection. We then perform the spinal measurements and automatically generate a PDF report that can be appended to the EHR. And lastly, we allow physicians to verify measures, share insights with patients, and take manual measurements if they don't agree with our measures. In terms of clinical validation, from a coronal X-ray perspective, we've demonstrated a median error of 2.67 degrees, which represents a 47% reduction in error when compared to the literature reported in current clinical measurements. From a sagittal perspective, we've demonstrated a 2.91 degree median error, which represents a 42% reduction. And overall, that equates to just above a 93% accuracy. And we've also shown through our studies that we have a 6.38 average processing time for these images. Compared to our competitors, such as AI-assisted tools like Nuvaline or EOS Medical, which have an 82% accuracy, as well as competitive research in this space, which has about an 86% accuracy reported in the literature, we have significantly better data quantity, which allows us to provide better accuracy through our machine learning models, as well as data quality. So the robustness really comes from a wide array of partners, rather than using a single data set that really hinders a lot of the robustness that other competitors have. In terms of our product timeline, we've built out our coronal and sagittal algorithms. We're starting to look at developing CT and MRI capabilities, specifically MRI for soft tissue disc herniation analysis, and we'll continue to build out our teledata platform as we look to the future. In terms of IP, we filed our provisional patent. We're collecting an additional 50,000 images through our partners like CTIP, a conglomerate of West Coast hospitals, and the United States Air Force, from which we won an AFWorks SBIR grant and are working with the director of neuroradiology there to continue with that grant process, as well as bring our technology to the DoD joint hospitals. And then in terms of regulatory, just last week we had our Q-Sub. We're anticipating a 510(k) submission early next year and approval in mid to late 2022. We're working with 7 hospitals currently across the East Coast, always looking to expand. So if you're interested in piloting with us, we'd love for you to reach out. In terms of funding, we've gathered $171,000 in non-dilutive funding to date. We're applying for an AFWorks phase 2 with the director of neuroradiology for $750K, and we have a fundraise planned in Q1 of next year. And we're looking at potential exits with companies like Nanox, which acquired Zebra Medical, NuVasive, and Stryker Spine. In terms of our team, we have experience across machine learning, cloud computing, data science, clinical studies, as well as the medical backing to bring this technology to market. And our scientific advisory board consists of the director of spine surgery and director of residency at MedStar Health in Georgetown. And if you're interested in joining our team, piloting with us, or have any additional questions or want to meet, please reach out to me at my email above. And thank you again for the opportunity to present today.
Alexander, thank you so much for being here. We definitely have some great questions from our audience tonight. I'm going to start with one of my own because one of the things that I love about all 3 companies tonight is this ability to not only improve efficiency for providers, but also accuracy. And your product is no different. So why is what you are doing so difficult that no one else has put together a fully automated system like this?
Certainly. So from a machine learning perspective, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's so difficult that competitors can't take advantage of strong computer scientists and build out technology. The really key moat that we have is this data, because it takes a significant amount of time to label the data, gather the data, and we use a special form of key point detection that analyzes approximately 60 pixels in the 4 million pixels that make up an X-ray. So we're detecting a very, very small percentage of those pixels, which on top of the data quantity also makes the algorithmic development significantly harder than your classic segmentation or landmark detection models.
Very cool. And another question that I'm going to merge with a question from our audience. So talk a little bit more about how this fits into the clinical workflow, and specifically from one of our attendees. Can the reports and images be pushed to an X-ray or view box for the surgeon to view during surgery?
Certainly. So we're currently working with various partners that are building data integration layers on top of your current PACS systems to bring this directly into the workflow. As of right now, we have a standalone platform, but we know that physicians tend to love technologies that integrate perfectly with the current system. So we're working on developing that right now, and that would allow us to return to the PACS system both the PDF report that has the full analysis, as well as things like these overlays, which then, as this question asks, could be pushed forward throughout the process and continue to be shown on the PACS systems. Yes.
Fantastic. And we have a couple of questions about your business model. So would the sales model be per image processed, or is it a subscription model? Actually, two of our attendees asked the same question. So maybe you can address that first.
Yeah, so this would be, at least we're anticipating a subscription model based on volume. So we have estimated a price based on salary and other items per image, but when actually charging hospital systems or radiology practices, we roll that up into a monthly SaaS fee.
Fantastic. And another question, talking really about other use cases. So is this translational to spine anatomy? So how well does that work? And then the other question really was around, sorry, I'm trying to get back to it, but clearly imaging and clinical outcomes post-op don't always correlate. So talk a little bit more again about, do you have any future planned studies to make sure that you really are improving outcomes? So other use cases, translation to other areas, as well as how are we correlating this to actual outcomes?
Certainly. So from the first perspective, we're looking at what the data that our images already has in it. So a lot of our spine images already have areas like hip, head, and neck in them, which we can use to detect, hip fractures, other sorts of injuries, and moving translationally into those industries. And then from the second question, let me see if I can see in the chat. The correlation. Really? So we're currently working with MedStar in Georgetown, and through this AppWorks proposal, we're going to be launching a study with the entire Air Force's data set to start to look at correlation and determine what that actual correlation is. And it's less about like, can we correlate exactly, and more about, can we triage and flag the patients that may need an earlier surgery and should have more dedicated physician time to determine their outcomes.
Well, and lastly, a question from our audience that's near and dear to my heart. I'm assuming this can be used for pediatrics as well as adults, but maybe talk more about that.
Certainly, yeah. So we actually started off with pediatrics. That's why our initial focus was a coronal algorithm, because typically pediatric spine, you're looking a lot at scoliosis and idiopathic scolioses.
Sure.
Started off there, and then we soon realized that from a market perspective, the geriatric market and spinal conditions related to triple D are significantly larger. So we started focusing on developing both sagittal and coronal simultaneously. But all of our FDA submissions and everything include pediatric patients as well.
Fantastic. That's what I like to hear. Thank you so much, Alexander, for being with us tonight. And thanks again for all of our presenters. And I would say in the future, even if you are not able to join us live for Pitch Club, register, because as you know, you're going to get that follow-up email with the videos so you can see those pitches after the fact. We also have, if you have not joined us in the past on LinkedIn, we have a Pitch Club LinkedIn specific group. There we tend to post things, follow-up information about our Pitch Club companies, so you can continue to follow them over time, which is really exciting because many of them are doing really well. I'd love to see that. Lastly, the presentation from tonight will be found on our AngelMD Pitch Club website, which I'm hoping Mike just put the LinkedIn group link in there, which is fantastic. And hopefully next he's going to help me out with the Pitch Club website link so folks can check out our previous pitch clubs as well. Finally, our next pitch club is coming up on Tuesday, October 12th, and that is going to be focused on novel therapeutics. I have to tell you, we have some really interesting companies coming up for that, so we hope you will join us. And I want to say thank you to all of you who have been with us tonight. Thanks to our great presenters. I loved all three of the companies and the diversity of what's happening in the field of radiology. And I look for all of you to join us here in just a minute in our networking lounge to continue the conversation. Thanks for being here tonight, and we hope to see you on Tuesday, October 12th.